Over the next 3 clips, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Najdorf variation of Sicilian. How I'm going to fit in all the variations, I'm not sure, but I'm going to give it a go. So this is going to be a very brief summary of what's going on in Najdorf. Okay, so first of all, it's a normal open Sicilian, and this is the start of the Najdorf variation. It looks like a very strange move, pawn to a6, but it's a very flexible move. Basically, black is waiting to see what white does before committing his pawns in the centre. He might play e6, might play e5, sometimes might even play g6, depending on how white plays with his pieces. So I'm going to look at the most critical move, and that's bishop g5 in this first clip. Now, black has many different systems against this, but I should just point out that knight d7 is currently quite popular, with the idea that after f4, queen c7, and then with this curious idea of giving up a pawn with g5. Now this is worth watching out for, because this pawn sacrifice is a very common idea in the Najdorf. The idea is that by exchanging off the pawn on f4, black wins control over the e5 square. So this is how usually things continue, and after bishop e3, knight e5. Although black is a pawn down, this splendid knight in the middle of the board gives black excellent compensation, and black's king, covered by these 3 pawns, is actually relatively safe in the middle of the board. But this g5 move is a very, very common theme in the bishop g5 variation of the Najdorf. Against knight d7, bishop c4 is also a very common move, and queen a5 is actually quite an old variation. So the queen is hitting the bishop on g5 and also threatens knight takes pawn. Therefore, queen d2 covers both those threats, and now e6. And if castles, then black can again go for this g5 option. Let's have a look. Followed by knight e5. So the pawn covers the f4 square, giving the knight this decent square on e5. So the knight is hitting the bishop, but also, well, just covering lots of very nice squares indeed. And maybe you can develop with bishop d7 and perhaps rook c8 next. And the king is reasonably safe in the middle of the board. But it's probably better for white to try castles queenside, and this was sort of quite popular system for black in the 1960s, but it was felt it was quite risky as well, because often there would be sacrifices on e6, sometimes a knight e5, sometimes white would get in f4 and e5, but okay, this is still a playable system for black.